Daybreak continues. Thank you for joining us for the newspaper review. I'm Hussein Mohammed. Our guest this morning, David Ole Sankok, is a nominated member of parliament. In the crosshairs of especially women members of parliament right now. I'll tell you why shortly. Thank you for making time for us this morning. Richard Onyonka, as always, great to have you. Kitutu Chache South, member of parliament. And Senator Kimani Umatangi, as always, again, great to have you on the show. Senator Kiambu County, thank you for making time for us this morning. Let's take a look at the headlines very quickly. There's an alarming one here from the Daily Nation. U.S. links minister and governor to drugs. Talking about top lawyer, an MP, a prosecutor, a senior detective, 2 judges and 2 magistrates in list of most culpable suspects under investigation for protecting the Akashas. This is a huge story. We all remember, I think a month or so ago, Akasha brothers accused by U.S. prosecutors. That story is on page 4 of the Nation. Of playing key roles in the family's drugs business, pleaded guilty to drug trafficking charges in New York. Baktash Akasha and his brother Ibrahim pleaded guilty to 7 criminal charges, including distribution of heroin and conspiracy to import drugs into the U.S. Now, the 10 that include a cabinet secretary, the Daily Nation says, the story here, are what a local judicial source described as most culpable, although many have been mentioned in the documents and exchange between Kenyan and American law enforcement agencies. This is definitely a very huge story. Of course, these are investigations. You can't say much about it. But let me just get a round of your views on the same. I'll start with you, Senator.
Sure. Let me, Hussein, start by saying good morning to our viewers. And yes, it's pretty right that the story, the issue of drug abuse in this country has been a matter of great concern, and not only in this country but globally. Now, what probably, in my view, would first start concerning us is the length of time it takes really to get any of these matters around and get either a conclusion, a conviction, and justice, so to say. If you look at even this case of the Akashas itself, the time when it started in this country, even before it moved to the US, and today now, it's years back, and you would be asking yourself, if then this is meant eventually to bring about justice and eventually the reform that is necessary, or measures that are necessary, then how long does it take? Hussein, I've been within my foundation, because I run a foundation. I've been, a first-hand witness to the effects, to what happens to drug. I've buried so many people, I'll tell you, even in my own country of Kiambu. People who are promising. I can tell you stories of promising young men born in well and good families, and destroyed utterly by drugs. So I believe that that more should be done, and we should move much more quickly. What is, as you've called it, a big story? What makes it even now more serious, although it's really not so very big news to us because it's been there in the news locally before, is that big shots are involved
and do you think something is going to happen this time? Well, we had an interview. The man on the right side of that paper, page 5, that is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, just the next page. I mean, the headline there talks about judiciary is a stumbling block in the fight against graft. Of course, that emanates from the interview I had with him on Tuesday night on Newsnight. We'll talk about that shortly. But he talked of the collaboration between them and the U.S. government, and how things are moving fast, and he made reference to the Akasha case. Do you think this time, because we've had this, cabinet governors or MP or so and so back then, do you think this time this cabinet secretary, the governor, or the other 10 prominent Kenyans, do you think we're going to see action this time?
Hussein, I would like to say that if I was in any way linked to the Akasha story, I would really be a worried person. The reason is we signed a bill, I think it's about 1.5 years ago, the anti-money laundering and special crimes bill, which was particularly and specifically targeting intercontinental crime, particularly drug peddling and drug transshipments and stuff like that. Kenya had just become a country where you remember when the president ordered that the ship which was carrying drugs be blown up. And the drug menace in this country, if there's anything that we need to be worst in. Let us be worst in everything else except be a country that is going to allow drug use and drug peddling to be a matter that we handle casually. My honest observation is the Akasha brothers, if you have been watching this story carefully, even from the US, have negotiated a plea bargain agreement whereby their sentences would most probably be reduced by them now actually saying exactly who they were dealing with, where the drugs were coming from, how much money they made out of that, who are their link people between the judiciary and the prosecution. And this should be a very interesting story as we move ahead. I believe that the prosecutions are going to be very, very fast because already in America you have the convictions. Right. So all you need, and I think the sentencing should be coming out any minute soon. Yeah. So what you have now is the names, the supposed Kenyans who have been named in this thing should really, really be worried. Remember, when the Akasha brothers were, quote unquote, according to me, playing around with the judiciary, going into getting, they were having stoppages over and over. When there would be the trials beginning, they would do ABCD. Finally, the Americans just came and picked them up from here. And you can see where it has headed to.
Right. Yeah, you know, this is a case that is alive in court, and I may not be very specific on it, so that I'll not be said I'm practicing some judice. But you know, these cases, especially cases of drugs, they slag in our courts for a long time. And you know, justice delayed is justice denied. Because what is happening now to those who are taking those drugs, if now justice is delayed, and those who are peddling these drugs are worse than killers, they are worse than murderers, and because they have not only murdered an individual, but they have murdered our generations. In fact, for me, we should not even be worried about cancer or worried about Al-Shabaab. We should actually be worried about drugs addiction in this country. And with the anti-money laundering bill that the Parliament of Kenya have just passed, then we are a bit safer. And I will request the government to cooperate in whichever way that the US government may need to make sure that all those who have been named are brought into books. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter the status you hold in the society, you should be brought into books because you have destroyed our generation.
Right, so this is definitely a very interesting story to watch over the coming days. You see, I mean, especially to find out who exactly this cabinet secretary, the governor, and all these other prominent Kenyans are. Another story in the headlines of the Daily Nation. Italian abducted in market attack, that is police officers in Kilifi and Tana River counties yesterday scrambling to secure an Italian student volunteer who was kidnapped during a gun attack in Chakama, Malindi. Still sad that this is happening in this country. One of the issues that triggered actually Kenya to go to Somalia. Yeah, sure. When I think two sisters were abducted back then. Another story here that interests me, I don't know if it interests my guests. MPs defy Uhuru in clamour for more parks. And Millie Odiabo will also be joining us shortly. You can see her already. That story is on page 6. Legislators insist that their second families must get state-funded medical insurance against President Kenyatta's plea that they put public interest first. I'll come to that shortly. Let's go to story page 2. Teachers' unions call for supplementary exams. This has happened time and time and again. There's a lot of stories here about how students performed at the KCPE exam. But now teachers' unions are demanding that candidates who did not sit for this year's KCPE examinations be given supplementary tests as directed by President Kenyatta last year. It has never happened in this country. Do you think it's time we start doing this?
Oh, well, probably, Hussein. I think it's quite in order that we would need to take a real look at our education system because certainly, if a young person has been preparing for the examination and then come the time of the examination for a reason or another, they've not been able to sit for the exam, then absolutely, it's only right that they should be given an opportunity to sit for the examination and probably even more so to ask, because that serves as the standard test after a whole 8 years of primary education, then what else would be there for those young people? And you would not be telling them, because they missed the exam, to go back to either retake the exam after going through class 8 a second time. Probably of even more concern, if you ask me, is do we still want to continue, especially at that level, with that standardized same level test for everyone to mean the same thing? I mean, because the world over, I think that's one big issue that definitely we have to deal with. But I believe it is time to relook at that. If for genuine reason any student have missed out on the exam, they should be allowed to take a second chance at it.
Yeah, Hussein, I mean, I wouldn't even want to say anything more than what my brother has said. The truth is, even in the universities, when you sit for an exam, when all the students sit for an exam, and for whatever reason, there are cases where some students are unwell, there are cases where you find there was some technical problem or whatever it is, then you find that there will be another cut or another examination which the student will have to sit for. My opinion is that this is something that even when the president announced it I think 1 year ago, it should be done.
Right, right. I'll look at the headlines of the Standard as well very shortly. New formula for sharing slots in top schools. This is the drama that follows the exam results, usually the KCPE exams. A lot of stories again about the performance of our students in the KCPE exams. But just like the Daily Nation, we also have a story on the gender bill. Duale Mbadi rally MPs to support the gender bill. That is on page number 8. And we also have their editorial, just like the Daily Nation. Haji is right in quest to raise the bar for implicated officials. And that is what I'd want us to focus on right now, together with the story of the Daily Nation, and which is also on their editorial. It follows, of course, the interview I had with Nuruddin Haji, the DPP, on Tuesday night. If you heard what he said, but we have that clip, and we're going to play it for you. DPP judiciary stumbling block against graft, and we have the clip, I gather. Generally, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji, wants Parliament to amend the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act to bar public officers charged with corruption from holding offices and earning salaries. He was talking about this as one of the major challenges he is facing currently in the war against graft, that you would charge somebody regardless of their position, and if they are holding any public office, then they continue to draw their salaries, and he says they interfere, and it's a threat to his cases because they interfere with the cases he's handling. Millie Odhiambo, first of all, has just joined us, Super North Member of Parliament. Thank you for making time for us this morning. Let's take a look at that clip.
I'm actually concerned on this. We have taken cases. We have charged individuals, be they governors or, constitutional office holders or the DCJ herself. My concern is this, that most of them still remain in office. And the sad thing is, we still have orders to allow them to enjoy whatever it is coming from the courts themselves. And some of the bail, for example, in a particular matter case to do with the governor, the bail terms are wanting. Because you saw him making presentation before development partners, international development partners, on issues development. And this is somebody who is facing a murder charge. This is somebody who is facing investigations on corruption. This is somebody who was found with guns, unexplained guns in his premises. I mean, we must have standards. And those standards need to be applied across board. And the courts need to help us. As much as there is zeal to give these people bail, and bail that are, in my opinion, and I stand guided, sometimes wanting, it just defeats the purpose of the whole exercise. When you get conservatory orders asking us not to investigate individuals, individuals who hold very important offices. It is very sad.
So where do you draw the line? Because it's always been a problem in this country, and people talk about the principle of innocence until proven guilty. Honorable Millie Odembe, will start with you on that.
Thank you, Hussein. First of all, let me say sorry for coming a bit late. But when I noticed that your panel was imbalanced, I wasn't coming actually because I was a bit busy. Okay. Then I decided I have to be here. But having said that, what I would say in response to what the DPP has said, that it is actually a challenge that the country is facing, and there are no easy solutions. It is a challenge because we must respect the rule of law. You can never compromise the rule of law. And everyone is innocent until proven guilty. That presumption never, you can never take away that from any Kenyan. Because when you make certain, averments, then it means in your mind, you're already saying or adjudging this person guilty, in which event, then they should go straight to jail. There's no need for a trial.
He's talking about the gravity of the cases against somebody holding public office.
Yes, I am getting to that. But really, we can never vacate the principle of innocent until proven guilty. That's why you see even Joey is actually complaining, and I think justifiably so, that
he won't get a fair trial.
He feels. I think he has good grounds, if you ask me.
Remark.
Yes. Yeah. I don't want to go into depth because that's an existing case, really, but I think everybody should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But having said that, we are facing a challenge. And the challenge is when you are in a position like that of the governor, like that of a deputy governor, like that of a member of parliament, like that of, another senior person, and people would presume, and in Kenya we have actually had it at a much higher level with the presidency and the deputy presidency. And people would presume that then you'll be using your position to manipulate justice. There is no standard that we have set by law to deal with those cases, especially when a person is elected. When you tell a person that they're elected that they vacate, what does it mean? At what point do you come back? Do you get re-elected back into office, or what does it exactly mean? Maybe for the governor it might be a bit different because then you have a deputy governor. But if you tell an MP, for instance, to step aside, who acts when the MP is not there? But I think he started a good conversation that we need to have, and we need to put clear standards so that even if somebody doesn't exactly or completely exit, but there must be ways in which a person who is charged deals. Because then otherwise he creates a perception of treating others a bit differently. That the law is used in a skewed manner towards the rich or the mighty.
Or selectively.
It's selectively.
Okay. Yeah, Hussein, Honorable Millie is a lawyer. For me, I'm a layman when it comes to law. But what I know is that I concur with what the DPP have said concerning our judiciary, that they should actually up their game. Because it is so heartbreaking for Kenyans to see that when there are cases like the one from Nakuru that involved somebody slaughtering a cat and nobody complained of stomachache or any disease that was brought as a result of eating the cat, then he was charged. Within 3 days, we knew that he was sentenced. There was also another lady in Kisumu, I presume, who had a relationship with a boy of 16 years. She was 24 years. Evidence were gathered all of a sudden. Within a week, she was charged. She was sent to jail. And we know the number of years, it was 15. Yet now when we have cases involving corruption and crime against humanity, these people, evidence, the court keep on complaining that the evidence are weak. I don't know how weak the evidence are. I think those ones of a relationship that we know, the relationship normally happen at night, and then evidence of having corruption money deposited in the banks during daytime, then they should have more evidence from corruption money. And then again, the court have some powers to order, for instance, production of bank statements from the suspect. Right. And when you see a suspect having deposited 600 million in the bank in one day, what did this suspect sell? Of course, 600 million can buy 1,000 Probox. So what?
He was not. I mean, he definitely was not happy with the judiciary. And he said, when I asked him whether he's doing anything about it, he said he's in conversations with the judiciary in terms of, shortening the duration of some of these cases that seem to drag on for ages in the courts.
That is what
but on the specific issue about talking about those who are suspected of corruption or other crimes or charged in court to step aside or vacate their offices, and now even saying they should not even earn their salaries. Let me just use an example with you. As a nominated member of parliament, if you have a case and you're charged in court, do you think, from what he's saying, you should just vacate your office immediately?
As far as I'm still a suspect and I have not been proven guilty, I also enjoy my human rights, because I have also rights. But then,
so you're not agreeing with the DPP?
No, I'm agreeing with the DPP. These cases should be shortened so that I'll be charged, and that's what I'm complaining about. So why should somebody who slaughtered a cat then be charged within 3 days? Okay. I should also be. So my offense should be known within 3 days.
Fine. If that case duration is 1 day or 1 month or 3 months,
yes,
you're okay to vacate office. That should apply.
Of course, if I'm guilty, I'll vacate the office.
I'm not talking about guiltiness. You don't want to answer the question.
Hussein, I want to look at this thing the way my colleague, Madam Millie, has raised it. You're innocent until proven guilty. That's number one. Number two, I also happen to be in a very interesting position in that there's a time I had a case for a period of 9 years. The truth is, imagine if I had stepped aside where I wasn't actually performing my duties as a member of parliament for the period of 5 years, because my case overlapped from my first term as a member of parliament and then on to the second term of parliament. If my voters were to have seen that this man is no longer actually serving the purpose of the job which we gave him because he is guilty, or he has a case in court, sorry, and therefore, according to us, we might as well get rid of him. For the simple reason that I would have stepped aside, I would not be performing the functions which these people elected me to perform, and to make matters worse, or to make matters better for me, I ended up winning the case. Now, if the DPP had sought orders, or if the law had put me in a position whereby I would have stepped aside, basically my political career would have ended, and basically I would actually be done. By the time I would have won the case, I would most probably not be an MP, and during that time, by the time I came back to tell my people that I was actually innocent and therefore please look at me differently, they would have said this thing has been overtaken by events. What I would want to agree with what Honorable Millie has said is we need to look at this issue afresh. We need to look at our chapter 6. Why did we dilute it? Is it making it easier for the DPP to deal with the critical issues, including our corruption in this country, which is really a major issue? Number two, are we, from the judiciary, is the judiciary performing its functions properly without necessarily favoring either side? And finally, does the DPP have the capacity to prosecute cases, make sure they collect the evidence, and make sure that this evidence is foolproof, and make sure that they get convictions? Sadly, that is not happening. In fact, to me, if you look at Honorable Haji, you look at the EACC and the DCI, we also need to start looking at, do we need these three agencies? Yes. What is happening between the DCI and the EACC? What is happening between the EACC and the DPP? And if we look at that, my honest observation is that then we should be able to facilitate and make it easier for Haji to, because constitutionally he's supposed to have that office. Are we giving him prosecutors who are the best in the country? The law students who are joining the DPP's office, are they really the best that Kenya could ever offer to him? When you look at EACC, why is it that the EACC is performing some functions? You find, like there was a time, I think it is about a week and a half ago, when we were saying I don't understand. I couldn't understand why EACC is bringing out this story about how Governor Obado has stolen these 2.5 billion shillings, and yet he has not even been taken to court. And why would they bring this information out to the public before the case is even heard? What if this man actually wins the case? Then what have you done to his character? What have you done to his image? I think all these institutions need to relook and rethink on how we are handling this matter.
In your opinion then, is it about shortening the time?
It includes...
Or just like Honorable Billy Odembe is saying, it's time to have this conversation?
Yes, it is. It includes shortening the time. It includes having special courts which even work on a 24-hour basis. In other countries, they're best practices.
If you're dealing with public people, public officers, that's what you mean?
Exactly. If you have a corruption
expedite.
Yes. Expedite the case.
And if it's expedited, there's no problem with vacating?
Absolutely not.
There's no problem.
I'll give you an example. Actually, if you look at before, actually, when I worked at the Office of Attorney General, there used to be one election petition court. I sat in that election petition court on behalf of the AG, and it had all election petitions all over the country. You can imagine how long the cases took. Some people were declared to have lost after they've served the full term and gone home. Then they were told, by the way, you rigged, and he has already served the term. But what did we do in that respect? The systems were changed. The law was amended that the system was changed. And now you see petition matters are being, they're decentralized. They're being heard by several courts. In the law, we provided a time frame within which matters for presidential matters are heard, and that's why we are not in a crisis as a country, because there's a time that reaches and it must be concluded. And you see the gubernatorial ones are the same. I think the very last one should be concluded by December. So either way, even if we have extended it by 2 years, for instance, people who come from Homa Bay County, we will definitely know whether we have a governor or we don't. Machakos the same, so that we don't drag people forever. So in the same manner, when you have cases of corruption involving, public officers, especially those holding elective positions, I think the matter should be expedited, and we need to provide by law the time frame within which this matter should be heard. In that respect, even if you were to tell me to step aside for 1 year, as the MP, I don't know, the constituency can autopilot, but within that 1 year, if I'm sure that, like I sympathize with my brother, Honorable Nyonka,
9 years.
You can imagine his entire first term, even as we just look at him and we say, hey, there he is, the one.
He's going to be jailed.
He's going to be jailed. And how do you move? I can even see he's much freer to perform his tasks. The other time, when you have these matters hanging around you, you can't do your work freely. You wouldn't be in your show speaking freely like
it's true.
Exactly.
It's true.
So there is a change. So I think we need a specific timeline.
Senator Matangi.
Well, I think my colleagues have said quite a bit about it, and it just, in my view, revolves around that. What I would be adding, Hussein, is that I think you try to understand the circumstances under which the DPP is airing his views, and I believe largely it is because he's commenting within the current circumstances and knowing what he wants to achieve. Probably, if you remember, the case when George W. Bush was president of the United States, and they had this big battle with terrorists and the attack on 9/11, and to mitigate, to deal with that scenario, he held people from battlefields and created Guantanamo Bay, and then the president who came after him had to address it now and say, now this is not the way to be done. But he was reacting circumstantially to what was happening. And probably, if you look at what Haji is saying, really is he's trying to win a war. And urgently so, because this country so definitely in that context he airs his views and finds that something else needs to be done, but probably then the way one would look at it is in my view, Hussein, even in civil service, a civil servant, if you are charged in a court of law or interdicted, you're still allowed by the code to earn at least a part of your salary, although you have been interdicted. And so this whole concept of your rights, and of course our constitution is very clear on the Bill of Rights, I think cannot be wished away. You know, the law is intended to stand still and serve people in good and in bad times, whether you have a good man in leadership, whether you have a dictator in leadership. And so you would be asking yourself, supposing these circumstances change, and you know, there are times when, if you had, for example, a situation where you have allowed, for example, if you go to Mheshimiwa Onyonka and say he's guilty and say step aside, you don't have a salary, and then somebody wants to abuse that law at a time, maybe for other reasons, and if it is provided for, it can be misused. So probably, you know, having a law that stands and withstands time, I think would be the cure. But as Mheshimiwa said, it's a big conversation.
Yeah,
and
that definitely we should have as a country, indeed.